State your name for the record. That's the sentence that opens every hearing I've ever transcribed in 9 years as a court reporter. I've typed it thousands of times for other people's worst days. I never once thought I'd be the one answering it. But there I was, in a folding chair in a county building that smelled like carpet cleaner, about to say my own name into my own microphone, about to describe, in exact words, what my mother and my sister did to my dead husband's things, while my son and I were 300 miles away in the mountains. I'll get you there, but you should know how it started, because the ending doesn't mean anything without the beginning. My name is Mara. I'm 36, and this is the year my family found out I remember everything, because remembering things exactly is what they pay me for. Ben was a wildland firefighter. 11 years on a hotshot crew out of Colorado, the kind of job where you kiss your family goodbye not knowing which fire season will be the one. It was the Larkspur Ridge fire 2 summers ago. Wind shift, Box Canyon, the radio call that every firefighter's wife has already rehearsed in her head 100 times before it happens for real. He was 35. The department gave our son Eli his father's helmet at the memorial, cleaned up, visor polished, absurdly light in a 7-year-old's hands. Eli keeps it on his dresser like a crown that doesn't fit yet. He's 9 now. He still talks to it sometimes when he thinks no one's listening. Ben and Eli had a project going in the garage before the fire took him. A chess set. Ben was carving the pieces himself, one at a time. Walnut for Eli's side, cherry for his own. Teaching Eli an opening move every Sunday and calling it First Move Day. They'd gotten through the pawns, both bishops, and one very lopsided knight before Ben went up to Larkspur Ridge and didn't come back down. Eli kept the unfinished set on his windowsill. He said the empty squares were still waiting for their turn. I'm telling you about the chess set now, because you're going to need it later, and I promised myself I'd stop being a person who buries the important thing until it's too late for anyone to help me carry it. My mother, Diane, moved into our spare room after my father died, and her retirement account turned out to be mostly a rumor. She's 63. She watches Eli after school 4 days a week, which sounds like generosity until you do the math on what I pay in her phone bill, her co-pays, and the gap between her fixed income and an actual functioning life. There's a word for that arrangement in families like mine. The word is convenient, and it's never applied to me by accident. I've been the convenient one since I was 10, back when my father's hours got cut, and somebody had to figure out how the lights stayed on. My mother has a talent for finding the strongest person in any room and quietly resting the whole room's weight on them. I used to think that was just what mothers did. It took me 26 years to notice it was a system and that I was the only load-bearing wall in it. My sister Priya is 7 years younger, bright, funny, chronically underwater, and somehow always the one the family rushes to save first. When her boyfriend found out she was pregnant and left the state 2 months before all of this happened, she didn't call to tell me she was scared. She called to tell me she was moving in, past tense, like the decision had already been finalized by a jury that hadn't included me. I said no. I want that on the record early, because people always ask later why I didn't see it coming. I saw every inch of it coming. I'd learned Priya's math by then. Need was the only currency that mattered in our family, and she'd been printing it her whole life. I told her no, and I paid the deposit on a 1-bedroom for her instead, 4 miles away, because saying no clean felt more honest than saying no, and then quietly caving by October. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 days after that. When she finally did, it was one sentence, delivered like scripture: she's your sister, and she has nothing. I remember thinking, I have a 9-year-old whose whole nervous system is built around this house staying the way his father left it. I didn't say it out loud. I should have. That's one of maybe 4 regrets I actually carry from this whole story. Here's the detail that meant nothing at the time, and everything 6 weeks later. Priya started asking Eli, sweetly, offhandedly, what was even in his room. "Just curious what a boy his age still needs," she said once, over dinner, smiling at him like she was doing research for a school project. I thought she was being an aunt. I understand now she was taking inventory. Every June, Eli and I drive up into the mountains for a week. No signal, no schedule, just a rented cabin and a lake, and the two of us learning how to be a family of 2 people instead of 3. It's the only week of the year I put down every single thing I'm carrying. This year we were gone 8 days. We got home on a Sunday evening, sunburned, tired, happy in that loose way you only get after a week with no phone. Eli ran ahead of me down the hall the way he always does. And then he stopped in his doorway and didn't move, and didn't make a sound, and that silence told me more than any scream could have. His room was gone. Not messy. Gone. Bed frame, desk, the shelf where the helmet used to sit, a shelf that was now holding baby blankets. In the corner where his windowsill chess set used to be, an unopened box for a bassinet. I found my sister in the bathroom down the hall, holding a paint swatch up to the light, like she was choosing between 2 shades of a life she hadn't asked me for. "Where are Eli's things?" I said. Not a question. I didn't have room left for a question mark. She actually smiled. One hand went to her belly, the way it always did when she wanted you to remember she outranked you now. "I needed the space," she said. "I sold what I could. Got a fair price, honestly." My mother appeared in the hallway with a mug of tea, unbothered, like she'd been expecting this conversation for weeks and had already decided how it would end. "She's pregnant, Mara," she said. "He's just a boy. He'll adjust." Eli grabbed 2 fistfuls of my shirt and pressed his face into my side, and I felt him shake before I heard him cry. I said one thing, and it wasn't to either of them. "Get your shoes, bud. We're staying at Nora's tonight." I took my son's hand and walked out of my own house. My mother watched us go, without an ounce of worry in her face. She'd spent 36 years teaching me that my silence was a form of agreement. She was about to learn how wrong that math was. Nora's my neighbor, middle school teacher, 2 kids of her own, the kind of friend who knows exactly when to make grilled cheese and say nothing. Eli sat on her couch and worked through a list out loud in a flat little voice, checking off his whole childhood like a man reading a casualty report. Is my bike gone? Is Dad's helmet gone? Is the chess set gone? I told him the truth every time, because he'd just watched 2 adults lie to his face with total confidence, and he needed 1 adult left who wouldn't. He got to the end of his list and said one sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. We weren't finished with the nights. Then he turned back to the TV, and I went and stood in Nora's kitchen and held onto the counter until my hands stopped shaking. That night, after he fell asleep, I did what I do for a living. I went back through everything in order, slow, exact, the way I transcribe testimony when a witness is trying to slide past a detail. And I hit a snag. The chess set had lived on a windowsill, in a room with a door that locks from the outside. A habit I'd started after Ben died, mostly so Eli would feel like his space was his, and no one else's. I had the only key. It was in my glove box 300 miles away. Somebody had gone looking for a spare. Somebody had found one. That's not a woman clearing space in a hurry. That's a decision, made on purpose, by someone who knew exactly whose door they were opening. Monday morning I went home to ask my questions the reasonable way first, because I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with before I decided what to do about it. Priya rolled her eyes at me over coffee. It was kid stuff, Mara. Half of it was cheap junk anyway. You should be thanking me. The place needed a purge. I asked about the helmet. The chess set. She shrugged. Old guy's hobby stuff. He's not using it. Not Dad. Not even a name. Just an obstacle she'd cleared off a shelf. My mother floated in on the tail end of that sentence with a solution already assembled, the way she always does. Eli could sleep on the pullout until the baby settled in. Kids are resilient. Someday everyone would laugh about this at Thanksgiving. I asked one question. How much did you get, Priya? She did the math out loud, proud of the number. Like 600, maybe a bit more. And it's spent. Car seat, stroller, you know how it is. I nodded, filed the number away, exactly the way I file testimony, word for word, no editorializing, and told her to be out of my house by dinner. She left. My mother followed her to the driveway, saying this wasn't over. They both thought I'd folded. I've folded my whole life on schedule, right on cue, every single time. They had no idea what happens when the person who always folds decides to read the whole transcript back first. That night I opened my sister's resale account and found my son's childhood laid out under her smiling profile photo, like a yard sale nobody had invited me to. 14 listings, a bike, a desk, a tablet I'd bought for school, and near the bottom, in a category she'd tagged vintage, fire dept, helmet, ceremonial, $80, barely used. $80 for the last thing the department ever handed my husband. I didn't throw my laptop. I did what I do in any hearing where somebody's trying to get away with something on the record. I built the transcript. Screenshot, timestamp, next. I matched every listing against the inventory I'd made for the life insurance claim after Ben died. Photos, serial numbers, an appraisal on the helmet's replacement value that a fire museum curator had done for me as a favor. 14 items, matched line for line, sold for a combined total that didn't even clear $1,000, against a real value north of 3. Then, at the very bottom of the page, one listing stopped me cold. Grayed out, marked sold. No photo of the item itself, just a blurry shot of our garage workbench, half a chess piece visible at the edge of the frame. Handmade wood chess set, unfinished, $10, porch pickup, cash sale. No buyer name, no thread. No way to trace it. I sat with that one for a long time before I closed the laptop. Tuesday, on my lunch break, I called the police non-emergency line from my car. The officer was polite and tired, in the particular way of someone who's heard family situation 1,000 times. He asked who was on the lease, who lived where, whether my sister had ever had a key. Then he said the sentence I'd already braced for, because I'd read it on 3 different legal forums at 2 in the morning the night before. This might land as a civil matter, ma'am. Family property disputes usually do. Here's the thing about my job. I don't argue with a ruling. I ask what evidence changes it. What would make it criminal instead? I asked. His voice shifted, a little straighter, a little more awake. Proof of ownership, proof of value, proof she had no legal claim to the property or the home. A pause. Most people calling me don't have any of that. I thought about the folder sitting open on my kitchen table with 14 matched listings, appraisals, and timestamps inside it. I have all of that, I told him. He laughed the way people laugh when they've heard 100 people promise the same thing and mean none of it. He had no idea who he was talking to. I spend my whole career making sure nobody's version of events gets to win just because they said it louder. Word travels fast in a family that's used to covering for each other. By Wednesday, my Aunt Rosalind called, official spokesperson for the family group chat, voice like warm honey poured directly over a threat. Mara, honey. Family doesn't call the police on family. I told her what had actually been sold, and to whom, and for how much. She sighed like I'd said something rude at a funeral. Your sister is pregnant, and alone, and you have a whole house. Fair's fair. There it was, the family's actual constitution, spoken out loud for the first time in a voice that wasn't my mother's, which is how I finally understood it wasn't just her opinion. It was policy. Installed generations ago, running quietly in the background of every decision this family had ever made about me. She told me the version of the story that was already circulating, that I'd been meaning to clear out Eli's old room anyway, that Priya had done me a favor managing the sale, and that I was twisting a kindness into a felony because I'd never liked my sister. While I'd been building a spreadsheet, my mother had already built a narrative. Only one of those holds up under cross-examination. I spent that week doing what I do best, turning chaos into an exact, boring, undeniable record. Column 1. 14 listings, screenshots, timestamps, every single one posted within 48 hours of us leaving for the mountains. Column 2. My own inventory, photo for photo, serial number for serial number. Column 3. Her payment app history, public, because privacy has never once occurred to my sister. Every sale, every buyer, every cheerful little note she typed while I was watching my son skip rocks 300 miles away. Total collected, just under $1,000. Actual replacement value, just over $3,200. I messaged the buyers I could identify. Most didn't answer. One did, and her reply put a cold line straight down my back. Wait, was this stuff stolen? I bought the bike for my grandson. There was an older guy in the driveway that day too, asking about a helmet. She gave me his name off the pickup thread. Retired firefighter, lived 2 towns over. I called him Friday. He didn't let me finish the story before he said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He drove over in a truck as old as my career, carried a small cardboard box up my front walk, like he was delivering a folded flag, and set it on my table. I tried to hand him the $60 he'd paid. He looked at the bills like I'd offered to pay him for oxygen. That's not a helmet, ma'am. That's a man's whole career. You keep your money. Inside the box, tucked under the liner where nobody would think to check, was a folded index card in handwriting I recognized instantly. Ben's engine company shift schedule from his very first season, the one he kept as a joke, a reminder of how green he used to be. He must have stored it there years ago and forgotten. A stranger's decency had just handed my son a piece of his father nobody knew was missing. If you've ever had to buy your own family's memory back from strangers, while the people who sold it called it fair, I want to hear it in the comments. That week taught me something I never expected. Total strangers were kinder to my son than his own blood. I wish I could tell you. Eli bounced back the way people love to promise kids will. Here's what actually happened. He started sleeping with the hallway light on again, something he hadn't needed since he was 5. His teacher sent home a drawing from art class. The assignment was, "Somewhere you feel safe." Eli had drawn an empty rectangle with a small door and nothing inside it. He'd asked the teacher how to spell empty. One night at Nora's, half asleep in the hallway, he asked me the question he'd clearly been carrying around all week. Did Dad's chess set get thrown away because we went on our trip? Because I wasn't there to stop it? I got down on the floor and held my son while he apologized for the crime of going on vacation with his mother. That's the night the last of my hesitation actually died. Up until then, some quiet part of me had been building this case the way you keep a card you hope you never have to play. Eli had just done the family's math in his own head and come up with the answer they'd taught him to expect, that love is rationed, and he'd used up his share by leaving town. I stopped hoping there was a version of this where nobody had to be held accountable. Monday morning I sat across from Detective Renata Cho, Property Crimes, in a small windowless room that smelled like old coffee. She read through my binder without a word, for almost 10 minutes, the kind of silence that means someone is actually paying attention. Then she started asking the questions that decide everything. Did your sister live in the home? No. And I could produce the lease I'd co-signed 4 miles away. Did she have permission? Any version of it? No. Whose name is on the house? Mine. Whose property was it? My son's, and my late husband's estate, backed by an appraisal with a serial number on every line. She sat back. People think it's not theft because it's family, she said. It's theft. She tapped my total, $3,200, and told me quietly that past a certain number, the charge class changes, and past this number specifically, it wasn't close. You transcribe for a living? She asked, flipping through my tabs. Every day, I said. She almost smiled. Then she warned me straight, no softening. I'll be calling your sister in for an interview. Once that door's open, it doesn't close again. I told her I'd already stopped believing that particular door was ever going to protect anyone but me. My sister got the detective's call on a Thursday. My family found out what I'd done within the hour. Guilt, it turns out, moves faster than any group chat. My mother didn't yell. Yelling would have meant treating me like an equal she was in a fight with. Instead, the house went cold and administrative. Notes appeared on the counter. After everything I've done for you, left by the coffee maker, like a memo nobody was brave enough to say out loud. Then came the actual move, the one her whole life had trained her to make. She announced, robe on, arms crossed, that she simply couldn't watch Eli anymore. Not for a daughter who treats family like criminals. I want you to understand what that actually cost, in real hours and real dollars, not in feelings. 4 days a week of childcare disappeared overnight. I asked for a schedule change at work. Nora took on pickups without being asked twice. I redid my whole budget at the kitchen table like I was auditing my own life. My safety net, it turned out, had fine print, and the fine print was written entirely in my mother's handwriting. That weekend, Priya texted for the first time since the empty room. No apology. Just, can we talk, alone? We met at a coffee shop, because I wasn't having her back in my house. She showed up glowing with grievance, and for 40 minutes she explained the whole situation to me like I hadn't lived through it. You have a house, a career, a kid who has everything. I have nothing. Kyle's gone. My body hurts every single day. And you're off at a lake while I'm basically homeless. Homeless, in the apartment I was still co-signing. Then she leaned in, gentle, generous, like she was doing me a favor by letting me off some hook I hadn't asked to be on. It's just stuff, Mara. Dead people don't need stuff. Living babies do. Here's what took me years to understand about my sister, and I noticed it clearly for the first time in that booth. She wasn't lying. She genuinely couldn't see the difference between need and right. She'd been declared the neediest person in the family at birth, and the law of the house had always ruled in her favor since. In her own mind, she hadn't stolen from my son. She'd simply enforced policy. I asked her one question. The helmet had his badge number stamped inside it. What number would you have put there instead? She stared at me. Then, because pressure always reveals a person's actual shape, she dropped the performance completely. If you keep pushing this, you'll lose all of us. Think about that. She meant it as a threat. I understood it, finally, as an offer. The county attorney's office moved forward, and suddenly my whole extended family discovered that the state doesn't negotiate the way relatives do. Priya's lawyer reached out about what he called a resolution everybody could live with. First offense, pregnant. The prosecutor was open to a deferred track, counseling, restitution, record wiped clean on completion, but he wanted to know where the victim stood. A letter from me supporting leniency, he said, would carry real weight, and riding right alongside that legal offer came the family's own version, delivered through my aunt's voicemail. Priya would apologize out loud, in front of everyone. My mother would put all of this behind us. Everything could go back to normal. All it would cost was one signature. I want to be completely honest about that week, because this is the part nobody believes. I wanted to sign it. Not for Priya, for the normal, for pancakes on Eli's birthday, and Sunday dinners with no lawyers in the room, and my old seat back at that table. That's the exact shape of the trap they build for women like me. The exit is always disguised as the thing you miss most. I rewrote my answer more times than I'll admit here. I said yes to one family dinner, and I went alone, because whatever was coming, Eli wasn't going to be in the room for it. 11 adults, 1 pot roast, and an empty chair positioned suspiciously close to my sister, which told me the seating chart had been planned in advance. My aunt stood before the salad was even served. We are not leaving this table until this family is whole again. Then they went around the table in turn, and I want you to hear how organized guilt sounds when it's aimed directly at you. She's pregnant, Mara. It's just stuff. Your father would be ashamed. Think of the baby. Think of your mother's blood pressure. Think of every Christmas from now on. I ate slowly and said almost nothing, because I'd learned something that summer. Silence works in both directions, and mine had finally stopped meaning agreement. My mother stood last, palms flat on the tablecloth, and made the offer that summed up her entire life's philosophy in one sentence: I'll take the blame. Tell the county it was my idea, my permission, all of it. Just save your sister. My own mother, offering to perjure herself, and calling it love, because that's the only kind of love anyone ever modeled for her. Every face turned to me. I folded my napkin, thanked Rosalind for dinner, and said I'd give my answer Thursday, in person, at the county attorney's office. I left 11 people sitting in a silence I did not fill. Wednesday night, Eli found me in the kitchen well past bedtime, negotiating face fully on. If Grandma says sorry, does everything go back to how it was? I told him some of it could, some couldn't. He nodded like a small actuary running numbers, and then asked the real question, the one he'd clearly been carrying up and down the hallway for days. Will Grandma still make me pancakes? 9 years old, and he was already learning the family's arithmetic, measuring exactly how much of his own hurt he should swallow quietly to keep the warm parts coming. He was bargaining exactly the way I'd bargained my entire life, offering up his pain first, hoping the people who caused it would keep loving him at the same discounted price. I saw myself at 10, standing at a stove making sure the lights stayed on for everyone but me, and I understood, completely, that this was the inheritance. This was the thing quietly getting handed down in my family, dressed up as loyalty. I was holding it now. The only question left was whether I'd pass it to him. I don't know about the pancakes, baby, I told him, but nobody gets to take your things and call it fair. Not ever again. And you will never have to earn what already belongs to you. He thought about that for a long moment, then went to bed. I sat back down and wrote, not the leniency letter, my victim impact statement. 4 paragraphs, every sentence a fact, nothing dressed up. Thursday, conference room. A wall clock, with a second hand, loud enough to count by. My sister's lawyer laid 2 folders on the table. The deferred agreement on one side. The flagged yellow tab where my signature was supposed to go, waiting. He talked for a while about fresh starts and healing, and no winners in a room like this. He said family twice in one sentence, and slid the letter toward me like it was already decided. The deputy county attorney looked at me and said gently that victims' wishes carried real weight here, that there was no wrong answer. I moved the leniency letter aside, unsigned, and set my own envelope down in its place. No, I said, and I'd like that noted without anger attached. I laid out my statement and my line-by-line inventory. I'm not here for a pound of flesh, I told him. I don't need my sister in a cell, and I'm not asking you to make an example of a pregnant first-time offender. I'm asking for 3 things. The truth, said out loud, in her own voice. Restitution. Every dollar, at whatever rate she can honestly manage. And no contact with my son unless I'm in the room. What I won't do is sign something that calls 6 days with a spare key, a misunderstanding. My sister stared at me and ran out of every script she'd brought with her. The pregnancy card, the sister card, the family card, all spent, face up on the table. They brought my mother in for her final play. She stood behind Priya's chair and said the family motto one last time, aimed straight at me. Fair is fair, Mara. After 36 years, that sentence finally arrived at the correct address. You're right, I said. That's exactly why I'm not signing. 2 weeks later, in a small courtroom with more echo than audience, my sister stood beside her lawyer and said guilty, in a voice that had no performance left in it at all. The plea was, by any honest measure, generous to her. Theft as a lower-tier felony, eligible for reduction, 3 years probation, counseling, restitution of $3,200 at whatever pace she could manage, and no contact with Eli except through me. No jail. I never once wanted jail. When the judge asked if the victim wished to be heard, I stood up in my regular clothes and read my 4 paragraphs. What was taken, what it was worth on paper, what it was worth at midnight to a boy who talks to his father's helmet when he thinks nobody's listening, what a locked door and a borrowed spare key say about intent. The last line I'd rewritten more times than every other sentence combined. I'm not here for a pound of flesh, I'm here for the record, because someday my son will ask what his mother did, and this is my answer. Nobody gasped. Real courtrooms don't. The judge accepted the plea, set the terms, and moved on to the next case. That ordinariness was its own kind of justice, my family's private constitution, the one where need always outranks ownership, overruled in 4 unremarkable minutes by the real one. My mother moved out on schedule, 30 days on the dot, and I kept every promise from that envelope. I packed her wedding china in newspaper myself and carried it to my aunt's spare room, and I set up her pill organizer on the windowsill, exactly how she likes it. That's the part people misunderstand about a boundary. I didn't stop taking care of my mother. I stopped paying the toll for being robbed by her. At the door, with the last box in my arms, she tried one final time. Quiet, no audience left to perform for. So that's it then. I'm inventory now too. I heard the whole family relay line in that sentence, whatever she'd learned at her own mother's kitchen table decades before I was ever born. No, I told her, you're just someone who finally has to keep her own promises. I hugged her, because she is my mother, and because she is also the very first person that system ever broke. Both true at once. Then I drove home to a house where every lock answered to exactly one key. Mine. The call about the chess set came in September, out of nowhere, from Walt, the firefighter who'd returned the helmet and never stopped quietly asking around at swap meets and hardware counters, describing a half-finished wood chess set to anyone who'd listen. Someone finally said, "That sounds like something my neighbor picked up off a porch this summer." The buyer, a woman named Carol, had bought it for $10, thinking it was a charming garage sale project. She'd started 3 pieces herself, badly, trying to finish the set as a surprise for her grandson. When I told her the truth on her doorstep, she went pale and disappeared inside without a word, and came back out 5 minutes later holding the whole box, refusing every dollar I tried to hand her. "Your husband started this," she said. "I only borrowed it." I drove it home with the box belted into the passenger seat like it was something alive. Eli inspected every piece on the kitchen table. Quiet, careful, exactly the way his father used to walk a perimeter before a burn. Then he looked up. "We're still not finished with the nights," he said. "No," I told him, "but I found something that helps." I went and got the index card Walt had returned to us, and behind it, tucked in the same box the whole time, without either of us noticing, a scrap of paper in Ben's handwriting I'd never seen, half a diagram, opening moves sketched out for every remaining piece, notes in the margin for a 9-year-old who'd only just started learning to think 3 moves ahead. We finished the set together, one Sunday at a time, exactly the way Ben and Eli had started it. Cherry and walnut, new knights carved from a kit because neither of us can actually whime, but every other piece his father's original work. The first restitution check cleared the same week we bought the wood. His teacher, this year, asked the class to draw somewhere they feel safe. Eli drew his room, every square filled in. My sister had a girl, that November. I mailed a box of newborn clothes to my aunt's address. No note. My argument was never with a baby, and a boundary doesn't have to come with barbed wire on top. She still tells anyone who'll listen that I ruined the family over furniture. My mother still lives with my aunt, still believes exactly what 1987, or whenever it was first taught her, still tells the story with herself as the reasonable one. I hear it gets repeated at dinners I'm not invited to anymore. The chain didn't break everywhere. It just doesn't run through my house. Here's the only thing I actually know for certain now, that I didn't know back in June. A family that only calls you strong while you're carrying them will call you cruel the exact day you set the weight down. And setting it down where your child can watch you do it might be the most loving thing your hands ever do. One empty room, 14 screenshots, 2 signatures I will never take back, and a chess set that finally has all its pieces. If someone in your family has ever called it fair when they took something from your child, protect the record first, and the child second, because the record is what protects the child. Tell me your version in the comments. I read every one.